Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining Tribe Public. This is John Heerdink. If you don't recognize me, I'm the managing member of Tribe Public, and we've been hosting a number of events over the last handful of years across the U.S. And with COVID, we've had to divert our attention to get in front of experts and leaders of industry through webinars like so many of us, and I'm sure you're doing it every day in some way. Thanks again for joining us. And again, remember, the spirit of Tribe is about getting you in front of the experts on the New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ, as well as experts in various fields that you care about, not just about who I care about. So continue to add to your wish list at tribepublic.com and or reach out to me whenever you like. And I do, again, appreciate that you've come in from wherever you are in the world today. And I want to introduce you to a distinguished gentleman in Dr. Lou Ignarro, who is at his home office, if you will, in California. And he has graciously given us his time today. This man has won a Nobel Prize, as many of you know. Not many of us can say that, and I am honored to be able to be in front of him today and also share him with you, if you will. And he's going to take us through a little bit about his background and then take us through this interesting development and understanding and knowledge and in his work in nitric oxide. I do apologize. For some reason, the PowerPoint functionality on the Zoom broadcast today is not pulling up or allowing us to share that with you, but you know, we're here for Dr. Lou, and I'm sure he'll do a great job. Again, Dr. Lou, thank you so much for coming here. And if you would say hello to everyone and tell us a little bit about yourself to start. Thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you very much, John. And it's really, it's great to be here. And once again, we apologize for not having this PowerPoint. Here I am presenting from California, from, I'd like to say sunny California, but it's not so sunny. I'm actually in between smoke particles and fires, which are occurring all around me in the Los Angeles area. It's really a mess. Anyway, let me tell you a little something about myself. I was born in Brooklyn, New York, in the Italian section. My parents were Italian immigrants. Dad was born in Naples and mom in Sicily. And despite that, they actually got married. And then I came along in 1941. Neither parent spoke English until I started elementary school. And this presented a very serious language barrier for me because I didn't speak English very well until the 3rd or 4th grade in elementary school. It took me a number of years to catch up to the other students, but I persevered, I worked hard, and eventually I excelled in my studies. Now, my passion and motivation, unlike my classmates, was always in chemistry and biology. And it started from a very young age, probably from when I was 10 years old, when I requested and my parents bought me a chemistry set and also a microscope to do a little bit of botany and biology. And so I pursued this. My undergraduate training was in chemistry at Columbia College in New York City. This was followed by medical school and graduate school at the University of Minnesota in Minneapolis. And then my postdoctoral studies were at the NIH, or National Institutes of Health, in Bethesda, Maryland, where I focused on a chemical approach to biology, which was a bit different than what most other people did. And so there we have it about my background.
Thank you, Dr. Lou. And just a quick reminder before you go into your presentation, to all the tribe that are on the call listening in, please know that throughout it, you can try to either email me at john@tribepublic.com or send through the chat feature questions that Dr. Lou will address at the end of the presentation in a short session. So again, I invite you to start the rest of your presentation, Dr. Lou.
Okay, great. And once again, I want to apologize because we're not able to show you the PowerPoint presentation. So I can see it in front of me, and hopefully you can see me. And so I'll try to do this as clearly as I can without showing you any slides. So this will be a big test for me, as it will for you. But I'm going to talk about a molecule called nitric oxide. And the title of the talk is Nitric Oxide from Viagra to COVID-19. And what I'm saying here will become clear momentarily. And actually what I'm going to take you through is some of the studies that we did in my laboratory that paved the way for me to go to Stockholm to receive the Nobel Prize. My interest has always been in cardiovascular research. Why? Because cardiovascular disease kills more Americans than does any other disease, clearly. And by cardiovascular disease, I'm talking about hypertension or high blood pressure, also stroke, where an unwanted blood clotting occurs in the brain, and heart attack, where unwanted blood clotting occurs in the coronary arteries of the heart. But also, we have to consider type 2 diabetes, which is a vascular disease, and believe it or not, erectile dysfunction or impotence. That's a vascular disease. And although that's not a life-threatening disease, it does affect more than 10% of the male population of the world. That's an incredible number when you think about it. Okay, what is the Nobel Prize? Everyone's heard about the Nobel Prize, but I can tell you that very few people know exactly what it is, what it means, and how it came about. Well, let's talk about Alfred Nobel, who in his will and testament established the Nobel Prizes. Alfred Nobel was a Swedish chemist, engineer, inventor, businessman, and philanthropist, best known for his invention of dynamite, which made him a very, very wealthy man. He was born in 1833 in Stockholm, and he passed away on December 10, 1896 in San Remo, Italy. The date December 10 is important because since the first Nobel Prizes in 1901, the Nobel ceremonies are always held on December 10 in Stockholm. And San Remo is significant because the Nobel ceremonies are beautiful with lots of flower arrangements for both the banquet and the ceremony. And all those flowers every year come from San Remo, Italy. So Nobel held about 355 different patents. And for the mid-19th century, that was not so bad. Dynamite, of course, was his most famous. He had many quotes during his lifetime, but my favorite is this: if I have 1,000 ideas and only one turns out to be successful, I am satisfied. But he had a lot more than just one successful idea. This is what Alfred Nobel looked like, and I think he was 42 or 43 years of age here when that photo was taken. So unbeknown to his family, friends, or colleagues, he had left most of his wealth in trust in order to fund the awards that would become known as the Nobel Prizes. And these are the Nobel Prizes. The original Nobel Prizes were in 5 categories that he wrote in his will and testament in 1896. And these categories are physiology or medicine, physics, chemistry, literature, and peace. Now, if you look at that, you might think, there's one missing. Where's economics? Okay, here we go, economic sciences. Now, economic sciences was not one of the prizes that Alfred Nobel put in his will. This came about many years later in the 1960s when there was a lot of pressure to create a Nobel Prize for economics. And so the Nobel Foundation agreed to do that, provided somebody else paid for and funded the prize in economics, since that was not clearly stated in Nobel's will. So the Bank of Sweden funded and still funds the Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences. And of course, we call that the Nobel Prize in Economics. Okay, some Nobel Prize facts first, just to set the stage. The first Nobel Prizes were awarded in 1901. That's nearly 120 years ago. A maximum of 3 persons per category can get the prize. The exception is the Peace Prize, where groups can get the prize, such as the Red Cross. The total number of prizes since 1901 has been 579. That's not too many. And the number of Nobel laureates has been 911. That obviously means that some people, shared the prize in a particular category. And as far as I'm concerned, the important one for me is physiology or medicine, and there's only been 211 of us since 1901. And my favorite is this. The most frequent Nobel laureate birthdays is the month of May. Guess what? My birthday is May 31st, so I just made it. Now, there are 2 major requirements for the Nobel Prize, again, established by Alfred Nobel in 1896, just a few months before his passing. One criterion is original discovery. To get the Nobel Prize, you have to make an original discovery. It doesn't make any difference how much you have advanced the field. That's not important. What's important is that you have to have discovered the field. But in addition to original discovery, you have to have shown a great benefit to humankind. Okay, a few famous Nobel laureates, I think almost all of which you know. Here's the first one. Wilhelm Röntgen won the prize in physics in 1901. That's the very first Nobel Prize. And why did he get the prize? Well, he invented or discovered X-rays. I think that's pretty important to humankind. And there's an X-ray photo of one of his hands. And as you can see, he did not take off his ring before he took that X-ray. Here's my favorite, Albert Einstein, 1921 prize in physics. He did so many things, it would take me 2 hours to talk about him. But he made so many advances in theoretical physics, in the theories of relativity, and the discovery of photoelectric effects. I mean, he discovered that light consists of particles called photons. No one had ever, discovered that before. And his theories of relativity soon became proven. So they're no longer theories, they're facts or knowledge. And of course, he's known for the most famous equation in the world, E equals mc squared, which resulted, of course, in the development of nuclear fission, nuclear power, and so on and so forth, which has really benefited humankind in a number of different ways. And of course, sometimes Nobel Prizes, in the discoveries that are made, people can take advantage of them in other ways, not intended. And of course, because of his E equals mc squared, discovery, of course, the atom bomb was developed based on that. See, the equation says energy equals mass times light, that's C, squared. So every time there's a tiny, tiny change in mass, the amount of energy change is equivalent to mass times the speed of light squared. That's an incredible number. And that is the basis of the atom bomb. Now, on a more friendly note, we have Alexander Fleming, who in 1945 received the prize in medicine for his discovery of penicillin. Well, we all know that revolutionized medicine and the treatment of infectious disease. And here's a great one. Many people believe that this is the most important prize in medicine. And this is Jim Watson, who shared the prize with Francis Crick in 1962 for discovering the double helix structure of DNA and information transfer in living matter. This man is now in his early 90s. He's quite healthy. I see him once or twice a year at different conferences. And it's fantastic to talk about him and how he discovered this double helical structure of DNA. And now for me. Now, what in the world did I do to receive such an accolade? Well, I received the prize in medicine in 1998 for my discovery of a very unique signaling molecule that our body produces called nitric oxide, or NO. And this is the way the chemist looks at nitric oxide. You don't have to be a chemist to understand it. You see in front of you 1 atom of nitrogen bound to 1 atom of oxygen, a very simple molecule. And now we regard, and we means the scientific community, we see nitric oxide as the most widespread signaling molecule in the body, signaling so many different cells to do so many different things. Also, it's clear now that nitric oxide is arguably the most widespread anti-aging molecule in the body. And I wish I had lots of time to talk to you about that. So if you don't believe that I was awarded the prize, here I am. This is not trick photography. I am here receiving the Nobel Prize from King Carl Gustaf of Sweden. This is 1998. And look at the carpet we're standing on. You notice we're standing on a symbol of NO. Now, of course, this is meant to stand for Nobel, but I like to think of it as meaning nitric oxide. Okay, so what was the original discovery that I made? Well, my laboratory showed that mammals, including humans, produce a unique gaseous molecule called nitric oxide, or NO, in many cell types. Okay, fine, good. So why did that deserve the Nobel Prize? Well, because of the benefit to humankind. Nitric oxide protects us against cardiovascular disease and dementia. By cardiovascular disease, I mean that nitric oxide can control our blood pressure and prevent hypertension. That's why we make nitric oxide. We also make nitric oxide to prevent unwanted blood clotting. Nitric oxide protects us against stroke and heart attack. NO is also a key player in providing nutrition to muscle cells during physical activity. This is very important. Nitric oxide is a vasodilator. It increases blood flow to the skeletal muscle and other organs in the body, but now I'm talking about skeletal muscle. This means that you get more blood flow to the skeletal muscle, which means you deliver more blood, more oxygen, and more nutrients to the muscles which are undergoing the physical activity. Also, we showed back in the 1980s that nitric oxide is the active ingredient in nitroglycerin. Nitroglycerin is a drug used to treat angina pectoris or impending heart attack. Nitroglycerin is a vasodilator, and that mechanism remained unknown for over 100 years until we showed that nitroglycerin is metabolized in our blood vessels to nitric oxide. And it's the same nitroglycerin that was used as the explosive in dynamite. And there's more. There's more. Here's the fun part. We discovered in 1992 that nitric oxide is the principal neurotransmitter mediating erectile function, sexual arousal. In other words, we showed that nitric oxide is the signaling molecule that causes penile erection. This was not known before we made our discovery, and therefore no drugs were available to treat dysfunction. You have to know what the neurotransmitter is before you can understand what erectile dysfunction is, and therefore how to develop drugs to treat this dreaded condition. We published our work in '92 in the New England Journal of Medicine, which is arguably the most prestigious medical journal in the world. This is the first and only paper I ever published in the New England Journal of Medicine. And many, many newspapers, magazines, news media picked up on this article because of its obvious importance and that it might lead someday to the development of a drug to treat erectile dysfunction. And so the New York Times interviewed me and covered our long interview on the left-hand column of the front page of the New York Times. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is the first and only time I've ever been on the front page of the New York Times, or in the New York Times, period. Now, an Italian newspaper covered a similar article, and in that article, they published a cartoon. Now, I can tell you, being Italian, that Italians sometimes think much more clearly in pictures rather than in words. And so in the newspaper, they had a cartoon, which you cannot see, but it shows a gentleman in bed with his lady, and he's wearing a gas tank in the back, and it says nitric oxide on the gas tank, written in Italian. And from that point on, there were quite a few jokes about the discoveries that we made, showing that nitric oxide is the mediator of penile erection. And so a couple of months after that, the distinguished research journal called Science actually declared nitric oxide as molecule of the year. And so remember, we published our paper in the New England Journal of Medicine in 1992. And so an interesting thing happened 6 years later, which would take us to 1998. And what happened was that sildenafil, or Viagra, was marketed. So Pfizer marketed Viagra, got FDA approval in 1998. And the way Viagra works, and I'm sorry I don't have time to explain it in detail, but Viagra works by increasing the actions of nitric oxide. People who have erectile dysfunction make only a very small amount of nitric oxide, not enough to develop an erectile effect. But in the presence of Viagra, the nitric oxide effect is magnified so that now most of these males can develop a normal or near normal erectile response. So I want to tell you about the dates more carefully. It was in March of 1998 that Viagra was marketed. And 6 months later, in October of 98, the Nobel Prize for nitric oxide gets announced. Now, I thought, is this a coincidence or what? And so I decided to look up the members of the Nobel Committee in physiology or medicine. And I noted that the majority of them were men over the age of 60. So maybe that at least partially explains the Nobel Prize for nitric oxide in 1998. Now, since that Nobel Prize, there have been a couple of very important advances and benefits of nitric oxide. Let me remind you that nitric oxide is a gas, and it has been used for a number of years therapeutically as a gas administered by inhalation to people. And there are two major uses that way. Inhaled nitric oxide is used to treat newborns with persistent pulmonary hypertension or hypertension in the lungs. And much more recently, and I'm so pleased to see this, inhaled nitric oxide is used to treat patients with COVID-19. Let me explain first the condition of persistent pulmonary hypertension in the newborn, okay? So as you know, when a fetus is developing in the mother, the blood does not circulate through the lungs because the fetus is not breathing. And so the fetus gets its oxygen from the mother through the placental circulation. But at birth, a couple of anatomic things change. Certain blood vessels close and so on, and blood is diverted through the lungs in order to pick up oxygen for the newborn baby. However, in some newborns, in newborns with persistent pulmonary hypertension, blood does not circulate through the lungs, and that's a big problem. The newborn cannot get oxygen. And so as a result, these babies turn blue in color, and this can be fatal due to pulmonary hypertension and hypoxemia. It's really a terrible condition. And we have now inhaled nitric oxide to the rescue. Inhalation of only a very small amount of nitric oxide, literally 50 parts per million, or if you calculate that out, that's 0.005% of nitric oxide mixed with air or oxygen. What happens, this nitric oxide enters to the lungs because it's given by inhalation and causes a selective pulmonary artery dilation. So the pulmonary arteries dilate, blood flows into the lungs and picks up oxygen. The result is a drop in pulmonary blood pressure and a marked increase in blood flow to the lungs where oxygen can be picked up. There's a dramatic increase in blood oxygenation. And right before your eyes, these babies turn from a blue color to a pink color. And I have seen this in the ICU. It's an amazing, miraculous thing to discover. This is truly one of the miraculous effects of nitric oxide. Just ask the parents of those newborn infants suffering from this problem. And more recently, I'm pleased to say that inhaled nitric oxide has found to be very successful in treating patients with COVID-19. Now, let me explain. These patients with COVID-19 die from inflammation and thrombosis. Thrombosis means massive blood clotting in the lungs. You get destruction of the lungs, blood clotting, there's no oxygen exchange. The coronavirus attaches to certain parts of the lung tissue and destroys the vascular lining, which is called the vascular endothelium, lining all arteries. It is that endothelium that makes all the nitric oxide in the lungs. That nitric oxide dilates the pulmonary artery to bring blood in and allow oxygenation to occur. Also, one of the functions of nitric oxide in the lungs is to kill invading microorganisms like bacteria and viruses as well, parasites. But if you destroy the endothelium, you do not make nitric oxide. And so you cannot protect the lungs against this coronavirus. And so the result is a marked decrease in nitric oxide production, resulting in thrombosis, hypoxemia, and death. These are how the patients die of COVID-19. Now, when you give inhaled nitric, that actually replaces the endothelium-derived nitric oxide that you no longer have in order to reduce inflammation and thrombosis. There are 5 big clinical trials underway. The trials are not over, the results are not back. But I hear through various leaks and so on that the trials are working very well. The results of one trial were released last week, published in the medical journal. It was a small clinical trial involving a couple of dozen pregnant women with severe COVID-19 in the ICU. They were given inhaled nitric oxide. Every single one of them survived. They were cured. Some of them delivered babies, normal babies, while they were in the hospital and then went home. The other ladies who had not delivered yet went home because they were cured of the COVID-19 and delivered perfectly normal babies after they got home. So everyone responded to this inhaled nitric oxide, another miraculous effect of nitric oxide. And so I can tell you, after 40 years of basic and clinical research involving nitric oxide, I have concluded, mainly recently, that nitric oxide is truly the miracle molecule of life. I really believe that. It's not only because I discovered nitric oxide, but when I look around and I see all the incredible beneficial effects of nitric oxide, from Viagra to treating pulmonary hypertension in the newborn, and now for treating COVID-19, I think I could rest my case and call this the miracle molecule of life. Well, I'm going to stop here, and I'm so sorry that you were unable to see the PowerPoint presentation, and I hope I made things clearly enough so that you get some glimpse of this molecule, nitric oxide. Thank you so much for your attention.
No, thank you, Dr. Liu. I really appreciate it. You answered a lot of the questions that people had as they were going along. You did a great job even without your PowerPoint. I'd love to have you on here for a long time. One of the questions that came up from our friend Alfred. He had said your advice about breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth, simplified, has received a lot of attention. Why is it necessary to breathe out through the mouth? Is it easier for me to breathe in and out of the nose? Can you just elaborate on that to help us understand?
Of course, of course. When I made the statement that one should breathe in through the nose and out through the mouth, the most important part of that statement that I want everybody to digest is the breathing in through the nose, because it's well known, this was discovered by some Swedish investigators a few years ago, the nasal passages in the lungs produce a great deal of nitric oxide. And the purpose of that is when you breathe in through the nose, you can relax the airways like the trachea and bronchioles to get more air in the lungs. You also dilate the pulmonary artery to get more blood flow to the lungs. And nitric oxide is a very good antimicrobial molecule. It can kill invading microbes, whether they're viruses, parasites, bacteria. And so now during the advent of this coronavirus pandemic, that's when I started to advocate that as often as you can, please breathe in through your nose, because then you'll be delivering all this beneficial nitric oxide into the lungs. Now, breathing out through the mouth is much more difficult to understand. And in some of the articles that I had published, I wasn't clear. The key in breathing out through the mouth is to do, as you sometimes do in yoga class, to breathe out slowly. If you breathe out slowly, for example, making a sound like ah or hum, what happens is that the airflow in the nose stops, but the nitric oxide is still being produced and winds up in the nasal cavity. And so when you do breathe in through your nose, you'll get more nitric oxide in the nose. You know, science, after thousands of years, science is now beginning to explain what yogis have been practicing for thousands of years. So I hope that helps.
It's amazing how some of the basics in life we just tend to not do on a daily basis that can keep us healthy. The follow-up question, actually, from our friend Alfred also says, would it help us prophylactically to inhale nitric oxide each day through a canister or a device, or what's your opinion there?
Well, Albert sounds like he's a scientist or wants to be one, or it's a good businessman. That's a fantastic idea. In fact, several different companies are working full-time to develop devices to breathe in nitric oxide. Right now, to breathe in nitric oxide gas is a very complicated matter. It involves a large machine with tanks of nitric oxide gas and oxygen that have to be mixed. The gas has to be filtered and scrubbed in order to remove very toxic nitrogen dioxide, or NO2. Nitric oxide is oxidized to NO2 in the presence of oxygen. The half-life of NO is a few seconds, very unstable. What I'm saying here is that only experts with special inhalation devices can administer nitric oxide. If these companies develop portable nitric oxide, and I agree with you, and this is the reason they're developing these devices, you could spend maybe 2 or 3 minutes, 2 or 3 times a day to breathe in nitric oxide, and you should be protected against not only getting COVID-19, but I'm going to stretch this out and predict. And, you know, as a Nobel laureate, I can predict whatever I want, you know. But I think that if you take these precautions and breathe in nitric oxide, you might even cut back or prevent yourself from getting the common flu, right? Which is caused by a virus, which nitric oxide can kill. Since I've been wearing a mask and practicing social distancing since February, I have not had a single cold. I have not had a single flu attack, nothing. And I used to get those every 2 or 3 months. I mean, it's amazing how your how you can protect yourself. So anyway, it's a long-winded answer to that magnificent question. And yes, I think we can protect ourselves and prevent COVID-19 in this way. And I'm pushing these companies to come out with their machines quickly.
Thank you. Thanks again for addressing the couple of questions that you didn't already address through your presentation, but it's fascinating work that you've and the accomplishments that you've made throughout your life. Look forward to possibly having you back on at some point and address more questions from the tribe, and to maybe talk about aging and anything else you want to talk about. Dr. Liu, I'm always interested. I want to thank you again for participating today. And at the same time, all of the tribe members around the world that have come in. Want to remind you guys that continue to send your wish list of experts into the tribe website. At the same time, at tribepublic.com. And again, if you want to have Dr. Liu back on, just express your interest on that. If we get enough interest, we'll go to Dr. Liu and request and see if he'll find the time to do it again on whatever topic you think he might be able to speak about. Lastly, this recording will be up of this video presentation up on the Tribe channel at YouTube within the week. And if you wanted to follow up and if you missed anything. Again, look forward to hear from all. Thanks again. And thank you, most importantly, Dr. Liu. All right.
Well, thank you, John, and thanks to everybody for listening. Thank you.
All the best.